So, my name is Ellie Belew. I'm a novelist and community historian, and High Voltage Women is my fifth and most recent book to be published. And this slideshow is going to just kind of cycle through. It's got a lot of complimentary information. I always think it's kind of fun to have some pictures while you're hearing my lovely voice. So, High Voltage Women tells the story of 10 women as they fought to gain entry into the electrical trades in Seattle beginning in the 70s. And I want to start by thanking the people who lived these stories because it's their efforts and their stories that they shared and documented that allowed me to pull this book together. So let me set the stage. In the late 60s and 70s, there was a lot of street politics and activism, a lot of progressive social change, and a lot of demonstrations and pushes and solidarity to move toward that in many fields. Racism, sexism, anti-war movements were all going on. In Seattle, a seemingly liberal, if not progressive city, it had big plans for infrastructure like the West Seattle Bridge, the I-90 bridge, public transportation, expanding the community college that's now Seattle Central. Within the building trades, we're talking traditional building trades, strong unions for strong members who were pretty much all white men. Non-union worker activism had triggered something in 1967 called the Philadelphia Plan, which was designed to force equal hiring of black men into the building trades. And this was in conjunction with this huge federal investment in infrastructure. By September 1969 in Seattle, an organization called the Central Contractors Association, which was co-founded by a very charismatic man named Tyree Scott, had used direct action to confront racist hiring and had interrupted work at every major federally funded construction project in Seattle. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Seattle Civil Rights and Labor History Project that's based at the UW, which is an amazing archive of interviews and photographs and journalism of the time, which I drew from. In 1972, Seattle then got hit with the Boeing crash, and we had 17% unemployment, trickle-down unemployment. In order for Seattle to receive any federal funding for its numerous infrastructure projects, it had to meet new federal anti-discrimination requirements. This meant that Seattle City Light, which is the city's publicly owned utility, had to deal with its own blatant discrimination in some way. So, that's kind of the background at a certain political level. Some of the characters you're going to meet in this book for the city and City Light were Gordon Vickery. He became superintendent of City Light in May '72 after he had raised havoc as head of the city's fire department. He was the first City Light superintendent who had no experience in the utility industry. And his personality was will speak for itself. Wes Elman and later Charlie Royer were Seattle's mayors, and they both seem to be generally remembered as progressive, but their actions in addressing the city's or not addressing the city's rampant racism and sexism distinctly blocked progress. IBEW Local 77, which is a Washington state local of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, represented almost every unionized worker at City Light in the 1970s. At the time, the local's membership was virtually all white and all male, with new members coming in via the traditional union FBI, fathers, brothers, and in-laws. An equally important player was the activist community of Seattle, and more particularly two groups, the Freedom Socialist Party, founded in July 1966, and Radical Women, that was founded in November 1967. So, now I'll get into the action. City Light, as I mentioned, had to meet federal affirmative action requirements in 1973. Vickery in 1973 decided to go for a pilot program that would bring women in as line workers, in a program which came to be called the Electrical Trades Trainee Program, or the ETT program. Clara Fraser, the best kind of rabble-rouser and community organizer, was relentless in her record-keeping, her on-the-fly organizing, and her humor and humanity. She was well known at the time within Seattle for her activism in politics and was a co-founder of both the Freedom Socialist Party and Radical Women. So Vickery hired Clara Fraser on June 4th, 1973 as education coordinator for the utility. Somehow Vickery thought he could hire Clara without her rocking the City Light boat, which was a huge mistake. He directed her to design and implement this new ETT program. Clara Fraser, among other things, insisted that the program have a cohort, a group of women, who moved through the program together so they would have some kind of solidarity. So in a very short period of time, 300 women applied to the program. And while the final applicants were being screened, there was a spontaneous 11-day walkout at City Light to protest Vickery's autocratic administration. At the end, 10 women were selected for the program, and I'm going to say their names because I think it's important. Angel Aerosmith, Terry Bach, Megan Cornish, Heidi Durham, Jennifer Gordon, Daisy Jones, Letha Neal, Jody Olvera, Margie Wagennight, and Patty Wong. And I say this always, solidarity amongst these 10 women sometimes is overstated and sometimes underestimated. They did not function as a totally unified group. They did all share the desire for a career as an electrical worker, a job that pays extremely well and that requires craft expertise. All of the ETTs contributed by doing their job day by day. When personal circumstances demanded, some were forced to leave City Light. All of these women made history, forcing a greater degree of equity within City Light, the City of Seattle's administration, and this community. So, by the time the ETT program started on June 24th, 1974, it was already a mess. Vickery and his administrative first assistant, Carol Coe, did everything they could to undermine the program before it even started. Logistics proposed and arranged for by Clara Fraser were rescheduled or remained unconfirmed. Many Seattle City Light line workers, all of whom were male, did not want women coming into their trade, and it became clear to them Vickery wasn't interested in having this ETT program work. Here are a few examples of what the 10 women endured as the ETT program began. The work orientation that was to have lasted 2 weeks got cut to 1 week during its first week. The women were sent out to work sites before they received a single paycheck, so several had no money for work clothing or safety equipment. Clara Fraser was summarily removed as director of the program. And it got worse. The racism, sexism, and administrative undermining of the program were bad enough that several of the ETTs and Clara Fraser filed their first discrimination claims within 8 weeks of the start of the program in August 1974. The ETT's claim was for what was then called sex discrimination. Clara filed for sex discrimination and also discrimination against political ideology. And it got worse. In July 1975, Clara Fraser was, quote, laid off with no notice. But the ETTs held on, and all but Patty Wong signed on to the discrimination claims. In September 75, after demanding the ETTs sign a loyalty oath, which is illegal, Vickery ended the ETT program. And he informed the ETTs that their program was never meant that they would actually get a job, only that they would be able to take a test. And that their test results would put them on a roster, which would allow them to wait in line for when a line worker apprenticeship position opened up. Meanwhile, the City Light rosters for this apprenticeship were redone, so there would be lots of men on the roster ahead of the ETTs. Despite all this, 2 of the ETTs managed to get hired. Jennifer Gordon, because she did so well on the test, and the other ETT, Patty Wong, seems to have been hired because she alone had insisted she had never experienced or witnessed any form of discrimination at City Light. At this point, in October 1975, IBEW Local 77 went out on strike. The local misjudged its bargaining power, and after 98 days, which is the longest public employees strike in Washington history, the line workers had to come back to City Light after accepting the contract that had made them go out on strike. Almost 10 months after City Light abruptly ended the ETT program, in July 76, the city's own Equal Rights Department forced the utility to rehire the ETTs with back pay. Jennifer Gordon had been unable to take the harassment in isolation and had quit during the strike. Daisy Jones couldn't come back because once the ETT program fell through, she needed to get immediate work to support her family. This disqualified her from being rehired. Coming back to City Light didn't mean worksite discrimination had gone away. The fact that the ETTs got a financial settlement while the striking line workers got nothing created deep resentments. The 8 women ETTs persevered. Heidi Durham, Terry Bach, and Megan Cornish went into the line worker apprenticeship program. The other ETTs pursued other aspects of the trade at City Light. And I could spend a couple hours reciting anecdotes that I've heard or been told about the treatment these women received as they inched their way through various apprenticeship pathways. Here's just a few. A hammer thrown at one woman's head, pornography plastered all over the woman's work sites, a woman left behind when her crew headed out, racist epithets on the loading docks, a woman hog-tied with electrical tape. So the ETTs continued to learn their trade and met these situations with courage and bravado and humor. One locked her co-workers in the truck until they committed to change their behavior. Another showed how her smaller hands could complete a task none of the men could do. And it went on. Then, in July 1977, Heidi Durham fell from a power pole and broke her back in what I consider to be a work situation that was totally fueled by harassment. In November 1979, Terry Bach passed the line workers exam and was second in line to become a journey level worker. The next day, working during a storm, she broke her neck. After much resistance from City Light, both Bach and Durham were eventually rehired within the trade. Meanwhile, what about Clara Fraser? All this time, her challenge, her claim of discrimination was going through the city's administrative hearings process, where she got a good decision. This good decision was immediately reversed by a hearings board that had no hearings experience. Clara appealed to Superior Court, and 8 years after she originally filed, on August 9, 1982, yes, Clara won her case, was awarded damages, and was reinstated.
Yay.
Yeah, long time. So, since the ETT program, and I think you could see the slides, or you will see the slides of the different ETTs and their careers with, they summarize their careers with Seattle City Light. It's amazing to me that these women actually continued with Seattle City Light for their entire work history after that. But since the ETT program, the City of Seattle has redone its administrative procedures and significantly raised the bar on what it now takes to file a discrimination claim. One of the things they did is that the city can add to the record on a discrimination claim while the person who's claiming the discrimination cannot. City Light, what had changed at City Light, I think Megan and Kathleen will perhaps explain some of the groups and the worker actions that have taken place to address racism and sexism since this program. The ETTs themselves became worksite leaders, offering support and initiatives to other anti-racist and anti-sexist programs. The office workers at Seattle City Light unionized. And I just have to say at this point, City Light is a publicly owned utility, so if you live in Seattle, you are co-owners of this utility, and you have the power to do things with that ownership. I want to kind of wrap up my part of things by saying a few things about organized labor, because I think it's easy to put them in the same box as some of the administrative, as the administration concerning racism and sexism. It's very important to me as a union supporter to remember that the unions came out of a culture of solidarity from and by workers who were indeed downtrodden. That's how anybody who still has an 8-hour day got it. That's how we have pensions. That's how a lot of things changed. Part of that was a very deep culture that was like family. So when they say the brotherhood, they actually mean a brotherhood. And out of that culture, it was not a diverse culture. The fathers, brothers, and in-laws created a very small, tight community in each trade. Those men had the stories of their grandfathers and their uncles about how that trade was created. That's who they learned from, and that's what they came up from. And so my question about the unionism today is, how can we create a culture where a diverse body of people can share that solidarity and that feeling, that familial sense of connection, the pride in the trade, and the hands-on training that goes with these trades. That, I think, is the future of the union. And it's not necessarily what some of the traditional unions are looking for, but I think at the point that the people, where there is no outside concerning who can be in the union, we will really have something. Have things changed in the workplace? Not nearly enough, especially as the women and people of color who are hired under affirmative action are retiring. The numbers are going way down. There's generations of people of color and women who still had to wait in line for murky reasons at best while white guys got the jobs. I think any woman or person of color who goes out to do this kind of work now doesn't have the thrill or whatever of being one of the first, but they have a lot of the same workplace issues going on, maybe at the same level, but the day-to-day experience is very isolated. So I kind of want to hand it off now to Megan and Kathleen so that they can speak from actual experience.